Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Boss Economics World, where we rip the glittering mask off government incompetence and expose the economic dumpster fires they've been lighting with your tax dollars. Buckle up, because today, we're diving headfirst into the latest clown show out of Washington, D.C., a budget package so catastrophic, it's practically a masterclass in how to tank an economy while smiling for the cameras. And oh boy, do we have receipts, data, and a whole lot of shade to throw. Let's get into it. Folks, if you thought the U.S. economy was already teetering on the edge of a cliff, congratulations, Republicans in Congress just handed it a shiny new pair of roller skates and a hearty shove. On Wednesday, May 14, 2025, GOP lawmakers flexed their majority muscles to ram through key elements of President Donald Trump's budget package. And let me tell you, this so-called big beautiful bill is about as beautiful as a landfill fire. It's a toxic cocktail of tax cuts for the ultra-wealthy, slashes to healthcare for the poor, and a debt explosion so massive it could make even Elon Musk blush. Now, I know what you're thinking, boss, this sounds like politics as usual. Oh, no, my friends, this is politics on steroids, with a side of economic recklessness that would make a Vegas slot machine look prudent. So, let's break this down, layer by layer, from the surface-level absurdity to the deep, dark economic rot underneath. And don't worry, we've got the latest data, real-world examples, and enough sarcasm to keep you awake through this fiscal nightmare. Let's start with the headline number. This big beautiful bill would add a jaw-dropping $4 trillion to the U.S. national debt. That's right, folks, trillion with a T. To put that in perspective, the U.S. national debt already stands at a staggering $36.2 trillion as of May 2025, equivalent to 127% of GDP. For those of you keeping score at home, that's worse than the debt-to-GDP ratio during the COVID-19 pandemic peak and higher than at any point since World War II, according to the Congressional Budget Office, CBO. And now, Republicans want to pour another $4 trillion of borrowed money onto this flaming pile of IOUs. Why? To fund tax cuts, of course. Because nothing screams fiscal responsibility like borrowing trillions to give billionaires a bigger yacht budget. But wait, it gets better. The CBO estimates that the total cost of this package could be even higher than $4 trillion, because, surprise, Republicans haven't exactly worked out the details. It's like ordering a $1,000 steak dinner and saying, we'll figure out how to pay for it later. Except, in this case, later means your kids, your grandkids, and probably their robot butlers will be stuck footing the bill. Now, let's talk about what these tax cuts actually do. Spoiler alert, if you're not in the top 1%, don't expect a golden ticket. According to the Tax Policy Center's latest analysis, May 2025, the lion's share of these tax cuts, nearly 60%, would go to households earning over $1 million annually. Meanwhile, the average middle-class family might see a tax break of about $500 per year, which, let's be honest, barely covers a month's worth of groceries in this inflation-ravaged economy. Oh, and fun fact, the Consumer Price Index, CPI, is still hovering at 5.2% year-over-year as of April 2025, per the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, meaning that measly tax break is already getting eaten up by rising prices. But here's the kicker, to pay for these tax cuts, Republicans are slashing spending on programs that actually help people. Take Medicaid, for example. The Energy and Commerce Committee just voted to tighten eligibility for this critical healthcare program, which currently covers 71 million low-income Americans. The CBO estimates that these changes would save the government $715 billion over the next decade. Sounds great, right? Except it comes at the cost of kicking 7.7 million people off the program. That's right, folks, 7.7 million of your neighbors, friends, and family members could lose access to healthcare, also the top 1% can afford an extra vacation home in the Hamptons. And don't even get me started on the hypocrisy. Republicans claim these cuts are about stabilizing Medicaid, with Representative Buddy Carter insisting, we are trying to save it. Oh, bless your heart, buddy. Save it? You're not saving it, you're gutting it. This is like saving a sinking ship by tossing the lifeboats overboard. The real reason for these cuts? To finance tax breaks for the wealthy, as Democratic Representative Frank Pallone pointed out. And the data backs him up. The CBO's analysis shows that the savings from Medicaid cuts almost perfectly offset the revenue lost from extending Trump's 2017 tax cuts, which are set to expire at the end of 2025. Now, let's zoom out to the bigger picture, because this isn't just about tax cuts and healthcare, it's about the very stability of the U.S. economy. Remember that $36.2 trillion national debt I mentioned earlier? Well, here's a fun fact, the U.S. is projected to spend $1.2 trillion on interest payments alone in 2025, according to the Treasury Department's latest estimates. That's more than the entire budget for Medicare, and it's only going to get worse as interest rates rise. The Federal Reserve has kept its benchmark rate at 5.25% to 5.5% as of May 2025, with no signs of significant cuts, thanks to persistent inflation. Higher rates mean higher borrowing costs, which means that $4 trillion in new debt is going to cost taxpayers a fortune in interest over the coming decades. But wait, there's more. This budget package also includes a plan to raise the debt ceiling by, you guessed it, another $4 trillion. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is already sounding the alarm, urging lawmakers to act by mid-July 2025 to avoid a default that could upend the global economy. And let's be real, folks, a U.S. debt default wouldn't just be a national embarrassment, it would be a global catastrophe. The U.S. dollar is still the world's reserve currency, with 59% of global foreign exchange reserves held in dollars as of Q1 2025, per the International Monetary Fund, IMF. A default could trigger a currency crisis, skyrocket borrowing costs, and send shockwaves through financial markets worldwide. Now, let's bring this down to earth, because numbers are great, but stories hit harder. Take a look at what's happening in states like Texas, where Medicaid cuts are already having devastating effects. According to a May 2025 report from the Kaiser Family Foundation, Texas has seen a 15% increase in uninsured children since the state began tightening Medicaid eligibility in 2023. Families are being forced to choose between paying for groceries and paying for doctor visits, all while corporate profits soar. ExxonMobil, headquartered in Texas, reported record profits of $55 billion in 2024, thanks in part to tax breaks like the ones Republicans want to extend. Or consider the case of Ohio, where the opioid crisis continues to ravage communities. Medicaid has been a lifeline for addiction treatment, but with 7.7 million people at risk of losing coverage nationwide, experts warn that overdose deaths could spike. The National Institute on Drug Abuse reported 108,000 overdose deaths in the U.S. in 2024, and cuts to Medicaid could push that number even higher. But hey, at least the private jet industry will be booming, right? So, who's to blame for this mess? Spoiler alert, it's not just the Republicans, though they're certainly leading the charge. The Democrats, bless their hearts, have spent years pushing their own brand of fiscal irresponsibility, from green energy boondoggles to unchecked entitlement spending. But right now, the GOP is the one driving the bus straight into the ditch, and they're doing it with a smile. House Speaker Mike Johnson claims they're on track to pass this monstrosity before the Memorial Day holiday, but even his own party is starting to balk. Moderate Republicans from blue states are upset about limits on state and local tax, SALT, deductions, while hardliners are demanding even deeper spending cuts. It's a circus, folks, and we're all just along for the ride. And let's not forget the looming debt ceiling deadline in the summer of 2025. If Congress fails to raise the ceiling, we could see a repeat of the 2011 debt ceiling crisis, when the U.S. credit rating was downgraded for the first time in history. Back then, the S&P 500 dropped 17% in the weeks following the downgrade, and borrowing costs spiked. This time, with the debt-to-GDP ratio already at 127%, the fallout could be even worse. So, what's the endgame here? Let me break it down for you, boss economic style. This budget package is a one-way ticket to an economic recession, and the government is the conductor. By piling on debt, slashing safety nets, and prioritizing tax cuts for the wealthy, Republicans are setting the stage for a perfect storm of inflation, inequality, and instability. The CBO projects that if this package passes, U.S. economic growth could slow to just 1.2% in 2026, down from an already anemic 1.8% in 2025. Unemployment, currently at 4.1%, BLS, April 2025, could tick up to 5.5% or higher, especially if consumer spending takes a hit from higher healthcare costs and reduced SNAP benefits. And let's not forget the global implications. A weaker U.S. economy means a weaker dollar, which means higher import prices, which means, you guessed it, more inflation. The IMF has already warned that global growth could fall to 2.8% in 2026 if the U.S. fails to get its fiscal house in order. But hey, at least the stock market will be happy in the short term, right? The S&P 500 is up 8% year-to-date as of May 2025, fueled by expectations of corporate tax cuts. Because nothing says economic recovery like a stock market bubble built on borrowed money. Now, I know what you're thinking, boss, this is all terrible, but what can I do about it? Great question, my financially savvy friends. First, get loud, call your representatives, especially if you live in a swing district. Second, protect your own finances. With inflation still raging and a recession looming, now is the time to pay down debt, build an emergency fund, and diversify your investments. And third, stay informed. Subscribe to Boss Economics World for more no-holds-barred takes on the economic train wrecks coming your way.